When you look up and see a private jet cutting through the clouds, you probably picture a billionaire sipping champagne, right? Or, some mega celebrity isolated in this ultimate bubble of luxury.
Oh, absolutely. It's an exclusive velvet rope box we tend to put private aviation into.
Right, but the reality of what is actually happening up there, it totally shatters that box completely. Because somewhere in the world right now, a Cessna Citation jet takes off or lands every 35 seconds.
Every 35 seconds.
Yeah.
Which is wild. Because when you pause to consider the logistical reality of that, you realize you aren't looking at some, niche hobby for the ultra-rich. You are looking at a highly coordinated, relentless global pulse.
A global pulse. That is actually the perfect way to frame it. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a really fascinating stack of sources today to figure out how this global pulse actually operates.
We really are. We've got technical specifications, an expansive set of operational brochures from Textron Aviation, covering the entire Cessna Citation family.
Yeah, and I have to mention, we are heavily relying on the incredible informational breakdowns from the YouTube channel AirPasian.
Oh yeah, their stuff is fantastic.
It really is. Their deep dive visual tours of these aircraft, they just provided so much necessary context for the raw data we're looking at. Like being able to actually see the things we are reading about in the technical specs.
It makes a massive difference.
It does. So our goal for you today is to completely rewire how you see these machines. We're exploring the physics of their design, the almost science fiction level of automation in their cockpits, and the really gritty real-world utility they serve.
Right, and to understand the modern jets flying that 35-second network today, we really have to look at the foundational philosophy that got them off the ground in the first place.
Which means going way back.
Exactly. This takes us back to the origins of the Cessna brand and to Clyde Cessna himself. Because in the early days of aviation, the industry standard was the biplane. Think of those old World War I fighters, right? With two sets of wings held together by this chaotic web of external struts and bracing wires.
Which, just visually speaking, looks like it would be terrible for flying. I mean, it looks like you're trying to push a metal scaffolding through the air.
Well, because that's essentially what they were doing.
Yeah.
I mean, early aircraft materials just weren't strong enough to support the upward force of lift on their own, so they needed all that external bracing.
Makes sense.
But Clyde Cessna was a massive champion of the fully cantilevered wing monoplane.
Okay, let's contextualize that for those of us who aren't aeronautical engineers. What does fully cantilevered actually mean in terms of physics?
Yeah, so it means the structural support is entirely internal. The wing doesn't rely on any external wires or struts at all.
Yeah.
It basically holds its own weight and manages the aerodynamic load using an internal beam called a spar.
Oh, wow. So it's completely self-supporting.
Exactly. And what Clyde Cessna recognized was that all those external wires on biplanes, they created massive parasitic drag. And drag is the ultimate enemy of flight. It steals your speed and it burns your fuel.
Right.
So by engineering a structurally strong wing that could hold itself up, he eliminated the scaffolding entirely.
So he was pushing a philosophy of doing more with less. Like if you cut the resistance, you unlock better performance without having to just, strap a bigger engine onto the plane.
Precisely. And that exact philosophy of finding the aerodynamic advantage is what led to a massive turning point for private aviation in 1968.
Which was the introduction of the Fanjet 500.
Yes, exactly. At the time, early business jets were built for pure blinding speed. And to achieve that speed, competitors were using swept wings, which are wings angled backward.
Because swept wings delay drag at high speeds, right? Like commercial airliners use them.
They do, yeah. But the trade-off is that swept wings generate terrible lift at low speeds.
Oh, I see.
So those early corporate jets had to fly incredibly fast just to stay airborne during landing, which meant they required massive, long, pristine runways to safely touch down and stop.
So they were super limited in where they could actually go.
Right. But Cessna flipped the script. They gave the Fanjet 500 straight wings.
Meaning it wasn't trying to win a supersonic race, it was trying to maximize lift at slower speeds.
Exactly. It could approach a runway much slower, which means it needed significantly less runway to stop.
So it's kind of like the difference between a Formula One car and a high-performance rally car.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, like the F1 competitors built machines that could only drive on pristine, perfectly straight racetracks. But Cessna built machines specifically tuned for winding, unpredictable back roads.
Exactly. It wasn't about showing off on the highway. It was about actually getting to your exact destination, even if that destination was a tiny rural airstrip.
And that underlying logic completely opened up the map. Because it was so forgiving to fly, the Fanjet 500 could access thousands of smaller, regional, sometimes unpaved airstrips that its swept-wing competitors simply couldn't physically maneuver into.
Right, and that ethos of agility and accessibility was so defining that in 1972, they rebranded the aircraft. They called it the Citation, naming it after the first racehorse to win the Triple Crown.
Thoroughbreds of the sky. I love that. And the sources highlight that this mindset evolved into a corporate philosophy for Textron Aviation, who is the current manufacturer. They operate on this rule that success is perpetual motion.
And the engineering history really proves they live by that rule.
Yeah.
I mean, they currently hold 181 patents. They don't just find a good design and sit on it.
Right, they keep pushing.
Exactly. That relentless drive is what led them to build the Citation X and later the Citation X Plus Left.
Which, even outside of aviation circles, the Citation X has this sort of legendary status.
Oh, absolutely. Because it completely shattered the expectations of what a civilian aircraft could do. It could fly at Mach 0.935. That is just below the speed of sound.
That is insanely fast.
Yeah, and for nearly 25 years, it held the title of the fastest commercial aircraft in the world.
Which is crazy, holding a technology record for a quarter of a century in a sector that evolves as violently fast as aviation is basically immortality.
It really is.
So how does that lineage, the cantilevered wings, the backroad accessibility of the Fanjet, and the raw speed of the Citation X, how does all of that manifest in what is rolling off the line today?
Well, that brings us to the newest descendant in our sources, which is the Cessna Citation M2 Gen 3. And the fascinating case study because it's considered an entry-level jet, yet it basically encapsulates 50 years of aerodynamic problem solving into a highly condensed package.
Yeah, let's look at the footprint of this machine because those numbers aren't just arbitrary dimensions, they represent that exact philosophy we just talked about. So it has a length of 42 feet 7 inches, but a wingspan of 47 feet 3 inches. The wings are literally longer than the body.
Which goes right back to the Fanjet 500 straight wing legacy. That massive wingspan provides the surface area needed for high lift at low speeds, letting this modern jet glide into those same tight rural runways.
And once it's up, the performance capabilities are intense. It climbs to a maximum altitude of 41,000 feet.
Which is incredibly high.
It is. For context, getting up to 41,000 feet means you are flying above the troposphere, and that is where all the turbulent, chaotic weather systems live, so you're basically cruising in smooth air.
Right, and up there, it hits a maximum cruise speed of 404 knots true airspeed, with a range of 1,550 nautical miles. It's powered by 2 Williams International turbofan engines, putting out nearly 4,000 pounds of combined thrust.
Okay, wait, this is where I have to pause and push back on the documentation for a second because there is a serious paradox in the technical specs. Yeah, we need to define useful load first. Useful load is the total weight of everything the plane is carrying, right? So the passengers, the cargo, and the massive amount of fuel required to fly 1,550 miles.
That's the definition, yes.
Okay, so the sources state the M2 Gen 3 has a useful load of 3,810 pounds, which brings its maximum takeoff weight to a staggering 10,700 pounds.
Correct.
And yet, this aircraft is prominently certified for a single pilot. How is that physically or mentally possible? I mean, a single human being is managing a 10,000-pound machine, flying 400 knots at 41,000 feet, with up to 7 passengers in the back. Doesn't that invite massive human error?
It definitely sounds like it would.
Right. The cognitive overload alone seems like a recipe for absolute disaster.
Well, you're hitting on the ultimate engineering hurdle. The single pilot certification is only legally and physically possible because of a complete paradigm shift in how we approach the cockpit.
Okay, explain that.
The pilot is no longer just flying the plane manually, right? They are functioning much more as a systems manager, overseeing some truly breathtaking advancements in flight automation.
All right, let's demystify that automation then. What is actually happening in that cockpit to keep one person from just being totally overwhelmed?
So, the brain of the M2 Gen 3 is the Garmin G3000 flight deck. It's a fully digital environment. But the critical upgrade in the Gen 3, and the feature that directly answers your question about cognitive overload, is the addition of standard Garmin auto throttles.
Wait, why are auto throttles the defining factor for a solo pilot?
Because flying a jet isn't just about pointing the nose where you want to go. Every single time you change the pitch of the aircraft to climb or descend, your airspeed changes.
Okay.
And to compensate for that, you have to manually adjust the engine thrust. And every time you adjust the thrust, you change your fuel burn rate. So the pilot constantly has to do this complex math in their head to ensure they have enough fuel to reach the destination, while factoring in headwinds and altitude changes.
Oh, wow. So it's just this endless, exhausting loop of calculations.
Exactly, and auto throttles completely absorb that loop. The computer continuously optimizes engine power for precise navigation. It calculates the fuel flow perfectly, and it adapts to the environment in real time.
That's incredible.
It really is. The pilot is freed up to focus on the macro-level strategy, communicating with air traffic control, monitoring weather fronts, planning the approach rather than micromanaging the engines.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. They are managing the flight, not wrestling the machine.
Right.
But the documentation from Textron, which, by the way, was also brilliantly demonstrated in those Air Patient videos, it highlights something even more radical: the Garmin Emergency Autoland system.
Oh, this feature is unbelievable.
It genuinely sounds like science fiction. Walk us through the exact algorithm of how this works if the pilot gets incapacitated.
Okay, let's assume the worst-case scenario. The single pilot suffers a severe medical emergency. Historically, in a single pilot jet, that is a catastrophic, fatal event.
Yeah.
But with Emergency Autoland, a passenger or the pilot, if they feel themselves slipping out of consciousness, simply lifts a guard and presses one dedicated button.
Wait, just a single button activates the entire sequence?
Just one button. And the moment that button is pressed, the computer becomes the pilot, the navigator, and the air traffic controller all at once.
Wow.
First, it levels the wings and stabilizes the aircraft. Then it pulls up a database of every surrounding airport. But it doesn't just pick the closest one.
What does it do?
It runs a complex calculation. It checks its own current weight, calculates the density altitude, factors in the real-time wind vectors, and determines exactly how much runway it needs to safely stop a 10,000-pound jet.
And it's doing all of that math in fractions of a second.
Instantly. It filters out runways that are too short or have terrible weather. Once it selects the optimal airport, it begins broadcasting an emergency code to air traffic control, audibly telling them its intentions.
It actually talks to ATC.
Yes. It navigates the route, flies the descent, lowers the landing gear, and flaps the precise speeds, physically touches down on the center line, and applies the brakes until the aircraft comes to a complete halt.
That is it is the ultimate digital co-pilot. I mean, it never escapes, it never panics, it doesn't get confused by instrument failure, and it's just perfectly ready to take the wheel.
Exactly.
The psychological relief for a single pilot, knowing that safety net exists for their family or the passengers sitting behind them, it just must be immeasurable.
It entirely changes the risk calculation of single pilot flight.
Yeah.
But, the intelligence of the M2 Gen 3 isn't just sitting around waiting for a medical emergency. It's actively maintaining the health of the aircraft every single day through a system called Linksys.
Oh, right. How does Linksys change the everyday operation of the jet?
Well, imagine you're driving a Formula One car at 200 miles per hour, and your pit crew is instantly receiving every single piece of telemetry data from your engine. If a valve starts vibrating, the pit crew already has the exact right wrench in their hands before you even pull into the pit lane. That's what Linksys does. It continuously monitors the central diagnostics maintenance system.
So if a sensor detects an anomaly at 40,000 feet, the plane basically texts the maintenance crew on the ground.
Essentially, yes. Through Linksys Air, it transmits the fault data via satellite while you are still cruising. It provides actionable answers in real time.
That's wild.
By the time the wheels hit the tarmac, the mechanics know exactly what the fault is, what part needs replacing, and how to fix it. It completely eliminates the hours of diagnostic guesswork that normally keeps planes grounded.
So structurally and technologically, we are looking at an incredibly rugged, hyper-intelligent piece of machinery.
Very much so.
But we have to address the stark contradiction here, because when you step inside the cabin, you are met with a completely different universe. It's easy to look at the interior options and just assume this plane is a flying boardroom.
Yeah, the cabin is really where that pop culture stereotype of private aviation finds its roots. It is engineered to be a complete acoustic and visual oasis.
The attention to detail is intense. And again, the Air Patient visual walkthroughs really highlight this beautifully.
Yeah.
We're talking about wireless charging integrated seamlessly into the side ledges.
Yeah.
And there are these highly curated interior themes. You can select the Mist collection for bright blonde woods and cool grays, or the driftwood theme with its deep espresso veneers.
They're gorgeous.
Oh, my favorite is the Ebony collection, which AirPasian showed off. It uses dark, sophisticated leathers fused with high-gloss carbon fiber cabinetry. It literally feels like the interior of a hypercar. And there's even a brilliant piece of functional engineering where a fold-down seat seamlessly converts into an additional 50 pounds of cargo storage.
It really is the absolute pinnacle of corporate comfort.
Yeah.
And for many operators, like the chief of maintenance for a multinational corporation cited in our sources, that luxury serves a very specific purpose. It's about transporting executives securely and comfortably so they can conduct business at 400 knots.
And that's exactly the neat little box we expect to put this jet into. But here is the massive plot twist that completely redefines the utility of these machines.
Yes, the utility aspect is fascinating.
When you look at who is actually deploying these exact same jets with their espresso wood veneers and ambient lighting, you find them operating in some of the most chaotic, gritty environments on Earth.
The contrast really is startling, because that luxury environment is frequently used as a tool for survival and logistics.
Let's dive into some of these specific use cases because they really force you to respect the hardware.
Well, consider natural disaster response. The brochure features the president of a major disaster response firm who utilizes a Citation jet.
Okay.
When a hurricane decimates a coastline, commercial flights are grounded, right? And highways are washed out or blocked by debris. He uses his jet to rapidly insert specialized relief teams and critical supplies directly into ground zero.
And this brings us right back to the physics of the cantilevered straight wing we discussed earlier. That aerodynamic ability to land on short, compromised airstrips becomes an absolute lifesaver when the major airports are underwater.
Exactly.
Furthermore, that acoustic soundproofing and luxury seating isn't just about feeling fancy. If you are flying a trauma surgeon into a disaster zone, you need them arriving rested and focused, not cognitively exhausted from the drone of jet engines.
That exact principle is why we see these jets heavily utilized as air ambulances too.
Right.
The African Medical and Research Foundation, known as AMREF Flying Doctors, is a prime example of this.
Oh, right.
They are Africa's leading aeromedical provider, and they rely heavily on Citation air ambulances.
It completely flips the narrative. Just imagine outfitting that carbon fiber, sleek interior with a full medical stretcher, pressurized oxygen systems, and intensive care life support monitors.
Yeah.
They use the jet's 1,550 nautical mile range to transport critically ill patients across vast remote distances, and even to repatriate patients across continents.
And we also see the precision of these aircraft leveraged for critical infrastructure. The Japanese Civil Aviation Bureau deploys specialized Citation longitude jets not for flying VIPs, but to actually inspect and calibrate the nation's airspace.
Wait, airspace calibration, what does that actually entail? Why do they need a business jet for that?
Well, every commercial airliner relies on ground-based radar and instrument landing systems to land safely, especially in zero visibility weather. But those ground instruments have to be constantly tested for mathematical accuracy.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, so the Japanese Civil Aviation Bureau uses the jet as a flying micrometer, basically. They fly incredibly precise, complex grids through the sky to measure the radar returns. If the jet's avionics and flight characteristics aren't absolutely flawless, the calibration of the entire country's airspace is compromised.
Wow, so they are the benchmark keeping millions of commercial passengers safe.
Exactly.
And it isn't strictly government bureaus or massive corporations doing this work either. The community of private owners is heavily involved in high-stakes utility. Look at the Citation Jet Pilots Association, or CJP.
Right, a great organization.
Yeah, this is a community of owners who leverage their personal machines to give back. They fly in the Special Olympics airlift, coordinating the massive logistics of transporting athletes and coaches.
Even more critically, these private jets are frequently enlisted to transport donor organs for transplant patients.
Oh, amazing.
When an organ becomes available, commercial flight schedules are totally useless. Speed is the only factor keeping that organ viable. So the perpetual motion of a private jet means it can launch immediately and fly directly to the waiting surgeon.
It really changes the math of how we view private aviation when you realize that speed and altitude aren't just for convenience. In many cases, they're literally deployed for survival.
They are.
And tying all of this sophisticated engineering and global utility together is a really vital note on how these machines are born in the first place. Textron Aviation builds these aircraft in a facility powered entirely by renewable wind energy harvested directly from the Kansas prairie.
Which perfectly closes the loop on Clyde Cessna's original philosophy, honestly.
Doing more with less.
Exactly. Eliminating the drag, cutting the waste and building a stronger foundation for the future.
So if we pull all these threads together, what is the real story of the private jet? We started by assuming it was just, a high-altitude playground.
Right.
But when you examine the evidence from the internal structural spars that eliminated biplane struts, to the straight-wing aerodynamics that unlocked rural runways, to a jet that can diagnose its own mechanical faults via satellite and execute a flawless, mathematically perfect land entirely on its own, you realize you are looking at a masterclass in human engineering.
You really are.
Whether it's carrying a CEO to a board meeting, dropping a specialized relief team into the aftermath of a hurricane, or rushing a donor heart to a hospital, these machines are the literal definition of perpetual motion.
They are vital, highly adaptable tools. But, tracing this evolution from external bracing wires to fully autonomous emergency landings leaves me with a rather profound question to consider regarding the future.
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
Well, we detailed exactly how the Garmin Emergency Autoland system works, right? The fact that a computer program can instantly calculate weight, density, altitude, wind vectors, runway length, communicate with air traffic control, and safely land a 10,000-pound jet at high speeds without a single human input.
Right. It's an infallible digital safety net.
It is. But if that algorithm is already proven to be that capable and that flawless during a terrifying crisis, how long will it be until we decide it's capable enough for everyday, routine operations?
Oh, wow.
How long until the single pilot certification evolves into zero pilots and the invisible digital co-pilot simply becomes the only pilot the aircraft requires?
Wow. That completely redefines the airspace. Next time you see a white contrail cutting across the sky, just ask yourself, is anyone actually flying that plane? That is all the time we have for today's deep dive. Keep looking up, and we'll catch you on the next one.